Mabuhay! I am John Joseph B. Posadas, an assistant professor of nursing from the UP College of Nursing. I am also a PhD student from the Department of Anthropology, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Today, I am going to present my reflections on the dilemmas of the urban poor, male survival strategies in Doña Imelda, Quezon City. In May 22, 2020, this article was published online via social media news network Rappler. The title reads, Dilemmas of the Urban Poor in Barangay Doña Imelda, Quezon City. It was co-produced, co-owned, co-implemented by Kuya Ricky, president of a people's organization in the community named Ulap Doña Imelda. Also by Ate Ivy, a community organizer from Community Organizers Multiversity or COM, and myself as a nurse and a scholar of anthropology. This is evidenced by the fact that it had Kuya Ricky and Ate Ivy as the first two authors. It was their story after all, so we had to co-beneficially transform from this experience. This project co-beneficially transformed the three of us, and on my part, it allowed me to fulfill the role of the nurse as a genuine people's advocate using the lens of anthropology. Written in the first person, one would be able to read the fear and anxiety Kuya Ricky and his community had more than a year ago. It told how he lost his livelihood and the places that were important for his survival strategies. Through his stories, I learned that the poor should not be blamed for being lazy and as peddlers of COVID. They are victims struggling every day, working hard to make ends meet. The poverty faced by Kuya Ricky's community was unique. Before the pandemic, Kuya Ricky struggled for their livelihood as a pedicab driver while facing threats of eviction from development projects related to the Pasig River. This became the impetus for their community to form a people's organization through the help of Ate Ivy's organization. While they were able to celebrate some small victories, their fight was still far from over. On March 2020, COVID-19 pandemic urged the government to impose lockdowns and community quarantine. When everyone was asked to stay at home, Kuya Ricky was unable to provide for his family. The passengers whom he once peddled his pedicab to were no longer in the streets. The informal economy where he engaged collapsed with the formal economic sector. His family was safe from COVID at their home, but they feared to die from hunger due to the loss of livelihood. 1 year into the community quarantine, Kuya Ricky's community adapted. In 1 year, the lockdown was gradually unlocked, allowing people to go out, to work, and to engage in strategic and alternative livelihood activities such as planting vegetables and setting up small businesses like sari-sari stores. They were still poor. The threat of eviction remains. They were still under community quarantine. The fear of his family going hungry still made Kuya Ricky anxious. But now, they witnessed their community undergo a COVID-19 fatigue. Members of their community doubted the health department's daily announcements. The surge in cases during March and April that coincided with the arrival of the first vaccine doses in the country made their community members think that it was the government's ploy for them to be forcibly vaccinated. Kuya Ricky and other members of their community expressed their hesitation. Now these dilemmas of the urban poor expanded further according to their current social climate. Due to the surge, the government placed Metro Manila in another lockdown last April 2021. It lasted for about 2 weeks and reignited Kuya Ricky's fears and anxieties. Their sources of livelihood were again muted, and while organized livelihood efforts they implemented in the community were stretched, he also mentions the added financial burden of providing internet load for his children, who were enrolled in school despite the pandemic. How can he buy mobile data if he can't even secure food for his family? The problem faced by Kuya Ricky and the rest of his community is rooted in poverty. While their stories resonate with others, their experience is unique. Aside from the threat of eviction and lack of livelihood, they still face lack of access to clean water, disasters such as floods, rising COVID-19 cases in the community, COVID-19 fatigue, and vaccine hesitancy. I asked Kuya Ricky if he already registered himself for vaccination. Instead, he shared this particular memory of his youth. And I quote, "When you speak of vaccines, I remember our family's carabao. It was vaccinated by local government personnel. Our carabao and all of the vaccinated carabaos in our barangay died. I was in grade 1 when this happened. I remember because I was already helping the fields at that time." He also asked me questions. What would happen to my family if I get sick because of the vaccine? Who's gonna work and provide for them? How can my children continue their studies? Who will take care of me and of my family if I get side effects? Hence, his question about the safety of the vaccines are valid. It shows how the government should ground its vaccination campaign according to the realities and the lives of the masses, and in particular, the urban poor. Kuya Ricky continues to use quote unquote male survival strategies to date. He is driven by the need to provide for the family as breadwinner and head of household. He prioritizes the safety of his family and the success of his children. He protects the welfare of the people's organizations and its members. And he also fosters mutually beneficial partnerships, linkages, and connections. Being virtually near during a pandemic was challenging. I had to consider the safety of my partners in the community itself, and myself. Despite having only the cell phone as a medium, it challenged me to be creative on how I can gather information and do ethnography in the community. It also made me realize the limitations of doing such types of methods. More importantly, it allowed me to reflect on its ethical implications and cultural impact. Mind you, the article had been approved by both the community and other stakeholders before it was published. While initially introducing myself as a nurse instead of a scholar of anthropology had its benefits, I later on realized to accept the differences in the privileges that I enjoy compared with my community partners. While both of us, the three of us, were affected by the pandemic, I used and shared my extra social position as a middle class government employed professor for and with Kuya Ricky's community. A year ago, I asked if we can continue to nurture the partnership we started. Now I can say that this partnership that began from being virtually near has already translated into actual encounters. Kuya Ricky and I continue to be there for each other, sharing about our recent experiences, praying and giving advice for one another, and even starting another project for children in their community. All of you watching now are sort of the first to be updated about their lives. As it has been more than a year into the pandemic, we, and I emphasize we, are currently writing to publish this update through the same social media news channel. I thank you for your time in listening to this presentation. These are my references, and you may access the social media article through the link below. You may also read my in-depth reflections through the Philippine Journal of Nursing article I've written, whose link I also provided below. Again, thank you very much.